So week two, our targets. First one is going to be our sleep. So the target for this week is 6 hours as a minimum. And ideally, where we'd like to be getting to is somewhere between 7 to 9 hours per night. Why do we need sleep? So sleep is going to be an essential part of your recovery. Whether your goal is fat loss or muscle gain, most of your muscular growth actually happens when you're asleep, when your body's recovering. A perfect example is a baby sleeps for 16 hours a day, and that's when they're growing at their most, when they go from a newly born to an infant to a toddler. Kids need so much sleep because their bodies are just growing and developing. Most people think that they're going to get big and strong when they're in the gym and they're lifting heavy and they're training hard, when actually it's the recovery process and sleep. And that's whenever your body can adapt to the stress that you're putting it under when you're training. So that's if your goal is muscular growth. If your goal is fat loss, then people that sleep less than 6 hours per night tend to have higher stress levels, which increases the amount of cortisol, your stress hormone that your body releases. So the more cortisol you have, the higher chance you have of having a higher body fat percentage. So it's also going to increase your insulin resistance, which means that your body is less efficient at breaking down glucose in your blood. And your glucose can come from any form of carbohydrate. So pastas, bread, potatoes, rice, fruit, any form of carbohydrate. Your body is going to be more efficient at breaking it down whenever you've got a lower level of insulin resistance. So that means that the more we sleep, the better our body is at breaking down blood glucose. The last factor is our body releases a hormone called ghrelin when we're tired. And ghrelin makes us crave sugary, salty, highly saturated fats, foods like your pizzas, crisps, biscuits, chocolate, all the things. Like, how many times have you been tired and you're living on caffeine and you just crave bad food? And that's what it's from, is from this hormone ghrelin that your body releases. So the more sleep that we get, the less this hormone is going to be active in our body, which means we're less likely to crave bad foods. Plus, if you're not sleeping at night, you're more likely to be in the cupboard looking for snacks whenever you should be in bed sleeping. So that's our first target for the week, is to get our sleep up to over 6 hours. The next one is we're going to increase our daily activity to 8,000 steps per day. So keep our 30 minutes of daily activity in. So whether that's, you can include your walks in that, or a gym workout, a body weight at home workout, whatever it is. And then we're going to try and hit our target of 8,000 steps per day. Ideally, we want to be working that up to between 10 and 12, and even more than 12 if we can. But similar to our concept with the water last week, if you're only drinking one glass of water, drinking 2 liters is a huge jump. So if you're only walking 5,000 steps a day, going from 5 to 10 to 12 is huge. So something that's easily achievable is 8,000. So again, we want to get into the habit of ticking boxes where we're consistently doing small things and we're just building that momentum up over time. Now, anyone that completed the mini challenge at the weekend, which was 12,000 steps on one of the 3 days, you can see that 12,000 is quite doable with a little bit of pre-planning. And during a fat loss phase with any of my clients, 12,000 steps per day is something that I recommend. But why 12,000? Okay, so 12,000 steps burns roughly 500 calories. Depending on, each individual is going to have a different metabolism, different height, different body weight. But on average, 500 calories is burned from 12,000 steps. 1 pound of body fat is 3,500 calories. So 5,000 calories per day from your steps multiplied by 7 days means that if we're walking 12,000 steps per day and we're eating maintenance calories, we're not even in a calorie deficit with our food, we're literally going to be burning a pound of fat off. per week by just increasing our daily activity to 12,000 steps. Fat loss is only going to occur whenever we are burning more calories than we're consuming. So for anyone that wants to lose body fat, the first thing that they think is, I need to restrict the amount of food that I am putting into my body, when in actual fact is we can eat the same amount and just increase the activity. Now, ideally, for the most efficient results, what we want to do is attack that from both sides. So we reduce the amount of food that we're eating and we increase the activity, and then we're going to have increased amount of a calorie deficit, which is going to give us greater success during the fat loss phase, but also less chance of rebound weight gain. Like, how many people have you seen that maybe people in this group where you've lost 5 kilos and you've put the same 5 kilos back on, and then you've lost 5 kilos again and put the same 5 kilos back on? And it's just this constant yo-yo, because all we're doing is we're restricting our food so much that by the time we get to the target that we hit, we're craving food so badly that then we start eating all this food that put the weight on in the first place, and you just get this never-ending yo-yo up and down of your weight. And that leads us into the most important thing that I wanted to talk about tonight, and that is the psychology of dieting. And the biggest mistake I see from any people that want to lose body fat is not setting a specific goal and a specific time frame before they start their dieting phase. So this is what I recommend my clients do, and this is what I recommend anybody who wants to lose weight does, is set yourself a start date, an end date, and what you want to achieve within that time frame. So a good example is 1 pound or 500 grams if you're using the metric system. So per week, right? So losing 1 pound of body fat per week for 10 weeks is going to result in a 10-pound loss or 5 kilo loss. Now, if we don't set these specific start, end dates, and goals, what we find is we just get stuck in this like eternal hamster wheel where we're always on a diet, off a diet, and we're never really getting to where we want to get to. So if you notice, I use the term fat loss phase more than I do dieting, because I want you to think of it as that it's a phase. A phase is something that has a start date and an end date. So when we set this predetermined amount of time, it psychologically means that we can deal with cutting out the treats, the chocolate, the biscuits, the crisps, the chips, the takeaways, alcohol, going out for meals. Because if we just know that I am sacrificing this in the short term for this in the long term, psychologically we can deal with it a lot better. Like, how many people have decided that they want to get in shape or they want to lose weight for a holiday or a wedding, and whenever they're down to those last few pounds or those last few weeks and things are getting tough, psychologically they know that if they just, right, I've only got 2 more weeks to go and then I get to relax, we can deal with it a lot better. So my recommendation for most people is somewhere between 8 to 12 weeks of a fat loss phase, and then after the fat loss phase we go into a maintenance phase. So anything over 12 weeks is going to lead to what is known as diet fatigue. So diet fatigue is basically psychologically, how many times have you been in a supermarket and you're walking past the aisle with the cakes and the buns, or walking past the frozen section and looking at the ice cream, and in your head you're already planning on all the food that you're going to have when you're not dieting anymore? Or you go past a takeaway and maybe it's food that you don't normally even eat, you don't even normally like, but you smell it and all of a sudden you start craving this food that you don't even like. But that's because you're experiencing diet fatigue and your body psychologically wants something that you can't have. So by only going for that 8 to 12 week period, we're going to reduce the amount of diet fatigue that we have. Then, once our fat loss phase is over, we go into our maintenance phase where we can start reincorporating some of those foods that we've been restricting. Um, Personal experience with this is like when I was powerlifting and I would go on these extreme diets to cut weight to get into a certain weight class. And I would compete on a Saturday morning and I would weigh in and I'd be like 92 kilos when I weighed in on a Saturday morning. I would finish the competition and I would just like binge eat all weekend. And I would step in the scales on Monday morning. I'd be like 96 kilos. I'd put obviously some of that was going to be water retention, but like I just basically went into like starvation mode and then into binge. So what we want to think of when we go into a maintenance phase is we want the maintenance phase to last roughly between half and 2/3 of the amount of time that we were dieting. So if we did a 12-week fat loss phase, we want to go into a maintenance phase for a minimum of 6 weeks, preferably closer to 8 weeks. And then if we have more weight to lose and we want to go again into another fat loss phase, we go into another fat loss phase for 8 to 12 weeks and just repeat that cycle where we're eating in maintenance, eating in fat loss, eating in maintenance, eating in fat loss. So how many people have put on the weight that they want to lose in 12 weeks? Nobody. Everyone's put the weight on over the space of 5, 10 years. But it took 10 years for the weight to go on. And now people think that they're going to lose this in 12 weeks. And it's just not realistic. And, social media has a big part to play in it where you see people doing these 12-week transformations. But how do you know it's 12 weeks? It's just somebody telling you on the internet. So it's not realistic. And I think a big problem is that people go into these diet phases and they don't do a proper maintenance phase afterwards and they just go out and binge eat. So my recommendation then is after you finish your fat loss phase and you go into your maintenance phase, don't go straight to the foods that you were restricting because you're not going to have the willpower to stop. Like no one's ever had one slice of pizza and went, well, that's enough for me. It's like you eat the whole pizza. You don't open a tube of Pringles and have a couple of Pringles. You eat the whole sleeve. You open a packet of biscuits and you have the whole packet of biscuits. You open up the tub of ice cream and you don't have a couple of scoops, you have the entire tub. So when we finish the fat loss phase, gradually increase the volume of food that we're eating, but continue eating the same foods for a couple of weeks. And then whenever those cravings calm down, then you can start having some treats because you can control yourself with them. So that's pretty much it for the psychology of dieting. And the same thing goes with a muscle gain phase. Like if anyone's trying to put on muscle mass, you don't want to be eating in a massive calorie surplus all the time because your body's just going to start putting on fat. You are going to put on muscle, but your body's going to put on fat. So if you're trying to put on 5 kilos of muscle, 10 kilos of muscle, then it's going to be an even slower process. What we find is that losing body fat is quite easy in comparison to putting on muscle mass. Like you can lose 25% of your body weight in the space of a year, whereas it might take you a year to put on 2 kilos of muscle. And that's just the sad reality of it is unless you're planning on taking something to help you. But I think the majority of people in this group, their main goal is going to be fat loss. So if anyone's got any questions, let me know.